Welcome in to the Bonesville Pregame Podcast. Al Myatt, joined by Kevin Monroe. Kevin, of course, a outstanding defensive back in his playing days at East Carolina, and you'll hear him on Saturday on the Pirate Radio Network as East Carolina takes on Temple. But Kevin, just a lot going on within the program this past week. Pirates came off a bye week, went to Army, fell behind 31-0. Gained some respectability. 45-28 was the final. Caton Hauser appeared to find some rhythm at quarterback later in the game. But Sunday morning, things changed. Mike Houston dismissed as the head football coach. Blake Harrell, the defensive coordinator, named the interim coach. And obviously a lot of adjustments and transition going into that Temple contest.
Yeah, I guess let's start with the Army game. I thought early on the defensive front seven, even though Army scored on their first possession, I thought that the front seven showed some resistance early on, as if they had done the film study and were in the right places and made some tackles. But the problem was they gave up a fairly deep pass on the first play of the game, which obviously you come into an Army game, you're not prepared for them to throw a ball on the first play of the game. So they gave up a pretty deep pass there. That put them in their own territory pretty quickly. I thought the biggest issue was offensively, they couldn't move the ball. And I thought early on, Caton Hauser looked off. I thought he was floating passes. He overthrew some receivers. He didn't seem comfortable. And so they had some 3 and outs there, which put the defense in a pretty bad spot. And the defense progressively got worse. The quarterback daily for Army, rushes for I don't know how many yards, but 5 touchdowns, 170 yards, something like that, and 5 touchdowns. Just kind of was able to do what he wanted once ECU offense wasn't responding and the defense started to get tired. So that was unfortunate. Coming off of the bad loss the week before, 2 weeks before, having the bye week, wanting to prove that you could get it done. And I think ultimately that's probably what got Coach fired, is that, you lay an egg against a Charlotte team that you not only should compete with, but should beat. And they beat you by 30 plus. And then you play Army, who you were 8-0 against coming into this game. And you're down 31-0 there early. So as you said, Coach is well compensated, and the Pirate fans expect more from their head coach, and that's what ultimately got him. And so, yeah, you come out of this with 2 straight losses and headed into Temple, into a game, homecoming, home game, a game you're favored in, a game you should win, but now you have a brand new coach.
In regard to Mike Houston, the game was not the same as when he came in at East Carolina in December, I guess, of 2018. There was not the NIL in place. There was not the transfer situation where players could play immediately after transfer. The game changed. And he tried to make adjustments, particularly after a 2-10 season last year, bringing in John David Baker and then 2 transfer quarterbacks, including Hauser from Michigan State and Jake Garcia, who had played at Miami and was at Missouri before coming to East Carolina. And then there was the COVID year. That had never been experienced in college football. And I think there was a rebuilding process that had to take place. I think that was accomplished to a degree during his tenure. But then 2-10 last year, a lot of close losses, not very good play at quarterback. They tried to address that. They tried to bring in a new offensive coordinator, John David Baker from Ole Miss. But it takes a little while for an offense to sink, I think. And I'm not sure if East Carolina really reached that point this season. Not over a period of 60 minutes, it didn't seem like. In games, the leads against Appalachian and Liberty, East Carolina couldn't maintain those. They could have been 5-0 going to Charlotte after that first conference win against Texas San Antonio, but things really went downhill with the Charlotte game, and then a bye week, and that was looked on as a good thing to prepare for Army's ground-oriented offense. But then the Cadets got out to a 31-0 lead. And I think, I looked at one of the message boards and it was 100% negative. And I'm not sure, what kind of pressure was being put on John Gilbert as far as making that move. But, if you've got wealthy financial backers saying they're not going to honor their pledge to build the indoor practice facility or something of that nature, just speculating on my part, that can accelerate, a coaching move.
Yeah, that and the NIL money, right? Like if you've got donors that are saying they will no longer get to the NIL, now you're stuck with a coach that the boosters don't like, and he has no money to bring in better players, and so they're basically handicapping or handcuffing the coach so that he can't get better in the hopes that they'll get rid of him. And so I think Gilbert was kind of between a rock and a hard place. Yes, he could have let him finish out the season probably and done it that way. But then people say, well, then you don't have your next coach in place early enough to start recruiting, those kids that want that NIL money and have, want to decide where they're going to go. So you needed to make a change sooner than later. As it stands, the Pirates were, I guess, the first team or one of the first teams in the nation to get rid of their coach and be looking. So now at least Gilbert can hit the ground running, contacting coaches and trying to find out who's available and who might be interested. And so several names have popped up. I played with both Dwayne Ledford and Terrell Williams, who are now coaching in the NFL. Ledford in the Falcons, and I think Terrell is either in Baltimore or Detroit. I think maybe Baltimore. But both those guys, kind of played in that mid to late 90s time frame with me, and have been coaching a long time. I would love to see a guy like that come back, a person that's played here, that has, steep coaching experience. I don't think we're going to be able to get a head coach from somewhere that fans are going to be excited about. It's possible you get a head coach from an FCS program, but we just went through that with Houston. And so I don't know how many people would be on board with that. You're probably not going to get a head coach at the FBS level. They would consider that maybe a lateral move or a step down. And so now you're looking at coordinators. And with coordinators, you never know. I mean, Scotty Montgomery, I still believe, is a good football coach. He just wasn't ready to be a head football coach. And so that could be said for Joe Sloan or Garrett Riley. Just because they're good coordinators, that won't make them necessarily good head coaches. And so you have to be careful when you go out and just grab an up-and-coming coordinator. And so a lot to go through in that thought process, but, it really would be nice to get somebody with East Carolina ties, somebody that wants to rebuild this program, that has a passion for rebuilding this program. And, whether they come and are here a few years and leave or not, that's just this day and age of coaching and even players are doing it. But at least someone has passion for the area and wants to leave the program in a better place than they found it.
And another possibility, and he's got East Carolina ties, would be Skip Holtz, who is still coaching in the United Football League. He's won championships with the Birmingham Stallions. He did not leave on good terms at East Carolina. He won 2 conference championships, the last 2 that East Carolina has won. But then he went to South Florida, and things didn't work out there. But Joe Sloan was with him at South Florida. And you mentioned, of course, Garrett Riley, the brother of Lincoln Riley, who was an outstanding offensive coordinator with the Pirates, now at Southern California, is Lincoln. And Garrett Riley is at Clemson. One drawback, I think, with Garrett is Clemson doesn't take transfers. And in this game, in this day and age, you've got to be familiar, I think, with that process and proficient with bringing in players that are available that can help your program. And then, of course, you've got some others. I think Trey Banks, he's the defensive coordinator at Tennessee. He's been mentioned as a possibility. And, of course, John Gilbert has ties to Tennessee. He brought in Mike Schwartz, his basketball coach, former Tennessee assistant. And John was at Tennessee in an administrative capacity during his career. So it remains to be seen. I think, like you say, there's time to find the right fit.
Yeah.
And if you don't get your number one choice, there's time to find a good fit. And I think what happened the last time, when Ruffin McNeil was dismissed, and a lot of people still question that, and people question, Steve Logan being dismissed and the downturns that the program took after each of those situations. But, you had an athletic director that dismissed Ruffin McNeil and brought in Scotty Montgomery. He didn't get his first choice. And I think in the process, realized he didn't have the resources to get his top choices. So he ended up going for Scotty, and just a combination of factors with Scotty Montgomery. And one thing that he did, he beat State in Carolina.
That's right.
And one criticism of Mike Houston is he didn't beat an in-state FBS team.
No.
Charlotte was the last one that he didn't beat, and Appalachian this season before that, but close loss to NC State the last time they came to Greenville. And that's one thing that Pirate fans can't tolerate, is losing over a period of time to these teams when you've got a football first athletic program. And generally State, Carolina, Duke are all regarded as, basketball first, whether that's justified or not. But and
Pirate fans could probably deal with losses to State and Carolina if that happened. But what they're not going to deal with is repeated losses to App State and Charlotte.
Yep. I think that is a big factor. And, I know the folks felt like that we should have beat State in Greenville. And, of course, the missed field goal at the end. But anyway, we'll let that go. And Blake Harrell is the new interim coach. Kevin, talk a little bit about that transition for him personally, taking leadership of the program.
Well, I think the interesting thing is, so far he has made some changes. He's made some changes to how practices go, the practice schedule, whether it be adding music. He's trying to introduce a different vibe to the program. He wants the players to be excited about him, to be excited about where the rest of the season is headed. So I think that's smart. You definitely don't want to come out and do the exact same things that Houston was doing, because then it just becomes the same old thing and nobody separates you from the Houston regime. And I've always been very high on Blake Harrell since he stepped on campus, because his defense has been markedly better since he stepped on campus. Now, that being said, you mentioned that the yardage they've given up over the last 2 weeks, specifically the rushing yardage. Fans are a little bit down on Blake Harrell and his defense right now. I don't know what the big turn has been in that defense. I mean, I think the only thing you can really tie it to is Savone Revel going down, and how that has just seemed to completely change the way their defense has been playing. They've been relatively healthy outside of that. And so, I would argue that with the right coach, almost at every position, the Pirates are good enough to win with the current schedule. So to be 3-4 with this schedule and these players is very disappointing. And I don't know, where to point that finger at. I was pleasantly surprised with the way Caden Hauser handled the third and fourth quarters. I wasn't that thrilled with his play in the first half, but he turned things around, got more comfortable, and started making some really nice throws. He seemed to be more confident himself in that second half. And so hopefully that, leads itself into this Temple game, and a Temple team that's not as good defensively as some of the teams they've seen recently. So, we'll see how that pans out. But I think Blake Harrell will just kind of keep everything status quo in terms of he'll run the defense, JDB will run the offense. He'll just have to handle some administrative things that he hadn't had to do up till now. But I wouldn't expect much to look different on the field for the Pirates over these last 5 games.
Well, you've got Temple, and I think this is a huge game, pivotal game, because you've had the upheaval with the firing of Mike Houston, and the Temple game is an opportunity to make a statement and say we're going forward strong. Or if you lose to Temple, which comes in at 2-5, I think the fan base is going to throw up their hands and say, when are we going to get it right? When are we going to get back to the respectability that we've cherished at East Carolina? And so I think this is a huge game. And I think a win it's important every week to win, but I think it's very important this week to take some momentum into the next two games with Florida Atlantic and Tulsa, which based on records, those are teams that East Carolina can compete with. Those are winnable games.
No, there's no doubt. And this is a Temple team that has struggled. You mentioned they get the victory over Tulsa. They lost the two previous games pretty badly to Army and a fairly close contest to UConn. But they're only scoring 19 points a game. They're giving up 32 points a game. So they're only rushing for 2.8 yards a carry, and opponents are rushing for almost 5 yards a carry against them. So that's where the Pirates have struggled this season. As of late, is stopping the run and being able to get a running game going. So this could be a big game for Montgomery, for Harris running the football. And then defensively, this is one of those kind of games where you feel like you can get back going, stopping that run and proving that you can do that and heading into the next week's game. So the Pirates find themselves in a good situation playing against this Temple team. Now, Evan Simon at quarterback is a pretty good player. Just taking a look at his stats, he's got 10 touchdowns to 4 interceptions and complete almost 65% of his passes. He's fairly accurate, but they just have one main receiver, and it's you have to go back to maybe like Justin Hardy days or Zay Jones days to see the discrepancy in completed passes. But Dante Wright has 42 completions. The next closest receiver has 15. And so he is the guy they're looking for when Simon drops back to pass the ball. He's looking for Dante Wright. So if they can find a way to contain him, he's got 517 yards receiving and 4 TDs on the year. That's the guy you key on. And so you know that the Blake Harrell is going to find a way to try to shut him down and make somebody else beat him.
And I think one thing that we don't know how it's going to work out is kind of Blake Harrell's ability in interpersonal relationships. He's gone from a situation now where he's a coworker with the football staff to being the boss. And is he going to tell John David Baker, say, look, we don't need to snap it as fast if we're up 2 touchdowns? And how will that work? Or is he going to say, you're the OC, you do your thing, I'll handle the defense, and I'll handle the press conference after the game?
Now, you make a great point, Al, because that affects his defense, right? When they go out there and go 3 and out, and it takes 30 seconds to go 3 and out, his defense is right back on the field. I know he's been in the press box just shaking his head like, what the heck's going on? And so they did slow it down some versus Army. It didn't seem to help a ton in terms of finding a way to get first downs, but they did switch it up a little bit. So we know that they have that in their arsenal to be able to slow it down and do things differently. But yeah, I think it makes a huge difference at who's at coach and what that coach is responsible for, because now that Blake Harrell is responsible for the defense and being the head coach, he can go to JDB and say, listen, this slow this tempo down a little bit. My guys are tired. We need a break here. And let's march this ball down the field slowly instead of going at breakneck speed and getting 3 and outs.
Well, Kevin, regardless of how people feel about the dismissal of Mike Houston, we're embarking on a new age in East Carolina football. It starts with Temple and Greenville, 2:00 kickoff on Saturday. And let's share that Bonesville tradition, if you would, Kevin's keys to the game.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about, what Temple was doing, running the football and against the run. And so I think establishing and dominating the line of scrimmage is where it's going to start. This offensive line for East Carolina has struggled some, not so much in pass blocking. They've kept the quarterbacks upright for the most part, but running the football, they've not opened up the holes that you'd want them to. And so playing an opponent that's giving up 5 yards per carry should be a big day. So offensive line has got to play well so that Harris and London, those guys can run the football. And then conversely, on the defensive end, they've got to be able to stop the run. Temple's not been proficient or effective running the football. They don't get very many yards per game rushing and only 2.8 yards a carry. So got to eat up those holes and get in the backfield, make penetration, and keep them from running the football. And then on the back end, they got to be solid back there. Can't give up any big plays. Dante Wright's the receiver. He's the guy. 42 receptions on the year, 517 yards. They've got to find a way to bracket him to keep him from hurting him. And then on the offensive end, Caden Hauser has got to be, as good as he was in the second half all game long next week or this Saturday. He can't throw interceptions like he did in the first half. He's got to be better with his passes. These receivers have to get up and make plays. So if they can control the line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively, control Dante Wright in the pass game in the back end, not give up any big plays, and then find a way for Hauser to be effective and complete some passes so that they can stretch the field. That's the way to win this game.
Very good. Kevin, as always, enjoyed your insights on the Bonesville Pregame Podcast and look forward to talking with you next week.
Appreciate it, Al.